At 5:46 a.m. on June 17, 2023, police in Henderson, Nevada responded to a 911 call placed from a gas station off I-515. The caller was a man in his early 40s. He identified himself as Robert Keller. His voice was steady. He told the dispatcher that his wife was dead and gave an exact address. Officers arrived at the Keller residence 15 minutes later. They found 38-year-old Melissa Keller lying. In the hallway between the bedroom and the bathroom, a gunshot wound to the chest and a small kitchen towel pressed over the entry point. The house was silent. The front door was open. There were no signs of forced entry. Robert Keller had already been taken into custody without resistance at the scene of the 911 call. Inside the home, nothing had been stolen. There were no broken windows. No defensive wounds on Melissa's body. A single shell casing was recovered near her feet, and the handgun used in the shooting was found inside the bathroom sink. But within hours, investigators uncovered a second problem. Melissa Keller didn't just have one residence. She had another apartment in Las Vegas, rented under a different name. It had been paid for in cash every month for over a year. Inside that unit, detectives found clothes, toiletries, and a second phone, along with printed flight confirmations, recent receipts, and a hidden envelope filled with cash. What had looked like a domestic tragedy was something else entirely. This wasn't a burglary, it wasn't spontaneous, it was the end of a separate life and the start of a much deeper investigation. Henderson, Nevada, sits just 16 miles southeast of Las Vegas. It's a quiet, growing city known for its well-planned neighborhoods and low crime rate. Subdivisions line the hillsides, filled with beige stucco homes, manicured lawns, and the promise of stability. It's a place people move to when they want a fresh start without giving up convenience. Robert and Melissa Keller had moved there in 2017. From the outside, they fit the picture of a stable, middle-class couple. Robert worked as a systems analyst for a software firm based out of California, commuting remotely and traveling to headquarters once a month. Melissa was a part-time paralegal at a small family law office in Henderson and managed her schedule around the couple's 2 dogs and occasional yoga retreats. They were described as polite but private by their neighbors. There were no public arguments, no police reports, no visible signs of dysfunction. They attended a local gym, dined out on weekends, posted occasional photos together on social media, vacations, anniversaries, quiet Sunday mornings. But over time, Melissa had started to disappear from those pictures. Her work hours changed. She spent more time in Las Vegas. Robert rarely talked about it. And by June 2023, their shared life was being held together by routine and silence. Neither of them seemed to know what the other was really doing, and then everything fell apart. The timeline of events on June 17th began just after 4:30 a.m. According to surveillance footage pulled from a neighbor's security system, Robert Keller exited the front door of his home at 4:33 a.m., wearing a t-shirt, sweatpants, and no shoes. He walked calmly to his black SUV, started the engine, then turned it off without moving the vehicle. 2 minutes later, he re-entered the house and closed the door behind him. Less than 15 minutes after that, a single gunshot was heard by a neighbor across the street. The sound was faint but unmistakable. By 5 a.m., Robert was on the road again, this time driving to the gas station 6 miles away, where he would place the 911 call that launched the investigation. Responding officers entered the Keller home through the unlocked front door. They found Melissa Keller lying on her side in the hallway, one arm underneath her torso, the other stretched toward the bedroom door. Blood had pooled beneath her and soaked into the carpet. The injury was precise, a close-range shot to the chest. She had been wearing sleepwear. There were no signs of a struggle. The towel pressed over the wound had been folded, not crumpled, and there were no defensive injuries on her hands or arms. The gun, a licensed Glock 19 registered to Robert Keller, was discovered inside the bathroom sink with the safety still engaged. The bathroom itself showed signs of recent use: wet footprints on the tile floor, traces of soap on the counter, and a faint trail of blood droplets leading from the hallway into the room. The water was off, but the drain in the sink still had warm condensation. Investigators concluded the gun had been rinsed, wiped, and placed deliberately in the basin before Robert left the house. Downstairs, everything was in order. There was no forced entry, no ransacked drawers, no valuables missing. The suitcase found by officers was half-packed, positioned on a dining chair near the front door. Inside were casual clothes, a passport, travel-size containers of shampoo and toothpaste, and printed airline confirmations for a flight to Austin, Texas, scheduled to depart later that day at 11:15 a.m. The reservations were under the name Melissa Connors, Melissa's maiden name. Detectives found the sealed envelope on the kitchen counter, unaddressed and unopened. Inside was $2,000 in cash and a prepaid SIM card. Robert had not touched it, nor had he attempted to conceal it. When officers reached him at the gas station, Robert was sitting on the curb near Pump 6. His phone was beside him on the pavement. His shirt was stained with blood, and there were faint scratches on his left forearm. Officers noted that he did not appear intoxicated or agitated. He was compliant. He stood when asked, placed his hands behind his back, and said nothing. At the precinct, Robert was processed and held for questioning, but during the first round of interviews, he remained silent. He refused to answer basic questions, instead requesting legal counsel immediately. While he waited in holding, officers returned to the residence with a warrant to search digital devices and hidden storage areas. Melissa's phone was missing. It was not found on her body, in her purse, or in the house, but her laptop, located in the upstairs office, was still powered on and open to an email draft addressed to someone named Alex. The content of the message had been deleted, but the autosave log showed that the message had been started just 10 hours before Melissa's death. Forensics later retrieved the partial message. "It's done. I told him. I'll leave early. Don't text until I get there." Further digging into Melissa's financial records uncovered a pattern. Over the last 8 months, she had withdrawn nearly $19,000 in cash, always in amounts under $500 to avoid bank reporting thresholds. The withdrawals were spaced out across multiple branches throughout the Las Vegas metro area. Those funds had not been deposited into any known joint account. In the garage, officers found a gym bag zipped inside the trunk of Melissa's sedan. It contained another prepaid phone, a change of clothes, and a second set of plane tickets to Dallas, dated 3 weeks earlier. The tickets had never been used. The attempt to cover up the shooting was minimal. There was no cleanup, no alibi constructed. Robert didn't attempt to flee, erase data, or create distance from the crime. Instead, he drove directly to a gas station and reported the event himself. But what he didn't say, and what investigators quickly discovered, was that Melissa had been preparing to vanish. And this wasn't the first time she had tried. The incident triggered an unraveling sequence of disclosures. Melissa wasn't just leaving her husband. She had been living an entirely separate existence, one that Robert had likely known about for weeks. The shooting, once viewed as a snap decision, began to look more like a last move in a collapsing double life. As homicide detectives took over the case, their first objective was to determine the full scope of Melissa Keller's recent activities. The evidence suggested premeditated plans to leave, but they needed confirmation of motive, means, and possible third-party involvement. Detective Laura Stein, a 19-year veteran of the Henderson Police Department, led the case. Her team began by tracing Melissa's travel documents, financial history, and digital footprint, starting with the second apartment registered under the name Melissa Connors. Located 22 miles away on the edge of North Las Vegas, the one-bedroom apartment had been leased 6 months earlier. Rent was paid in cash, and the lease agreement listed a phone number tied to a prepaid mobile device, later recovered from the gym bag in Melissa's car. The landlord confirmed Melissa visited the Apartment twice a week, sometimes staying overnight. Security footage from the building's entryway showed a consistent pattern. She never arrived with Robert. She never stayed longer than 48 hours. And she was never alone. A man appeared regularly in the footage, entering the building alongside. Melissa carrying groceries, sometimes exiting in the early mornings. Facial recognition failed due to poor video quality, but based on Melissa's communication records, detectives identified him as Alexander Reed, 35 years old, a self-employed contractor based in Henderson with a limited online presence and no criminal record. His name didn't appear on any of Melissa's known accounts. He wasn't listed as an emergency contact. He had never interacted with the couple's neighbors or appeared in family photos. The second prepaid phone, recovered. From the trunk, revealed a string of text messages exchanged between Melissa and Alexander. The language was intimate but cautious. There were references to the plan, mentions of Phase 2, and coded phrases like Friday window and burn everything on logout. The tone of the messages indicated secrecy, not panic. These weren't recent developments. The affair had structure. Detectives also noted that the prepaid phone had no internet browsing history, GPS logs, or photos, an intentional wipe of all non-essential data. Only the messages had remained, and even those were partial. Melissa had been methodical in separating her personal life from her second identity. Meanwhile, Robert Keller remained in custody, refusing to speak without legal counsel. His silence wasn't resistance. It was strategy. Investigators submitted his electronics for forensic review, starting with his work laptop and personal phone. While the laptop yielded nothing unusual, his smartphone revealed something different. On it, investigators found a hidden app disguised as a calculator. Upon decryption, it revealed dozens of screenshots, bank transfers under Melissa's name, images of unfamiliar male faces pulled from social media, and a long PDF file titled Exit Script Connors. The document, time-stamped 1 month prior to the murder, outlined a 10-step sequence detailing how Melissa intended to sever ties with Robert, including the closure of joint accounts, resignation from her job, and planned non-return from a scheduled work trip to Los Angeles. Each step had been checked off, except the last. Final conversation. Investigators now believed that Robert had discovered the document, and everything else, but the timeline of when he found out was still unclear. At Melissa's law office, detectives recovered her company-issued desktop and a handwritten planner. In the planner were notes under false initials, tracking meeting times with AR, and a running list of necessities for move. Colleagues reported no knowledge of trouble in her marriage, but one assistant recalled Melissa taking a sudden interest in Texas-based family law firms and asking general questions about clean exits from community property marriages. The search expanded to Alexander Reed. Police obtained a warrant to search his residence. Inside, they found 2 duffel bags partially packed, 2 burner phones still in original packaging, and a printed itinerary for a flight to Mexico scheduled for the following week. When located and questioned, Alexander denied any involvement in the murder and insisted Melissa had planned everything. He claimed he had no idea she was still living with her husband until 2 months prior. His phone data corroborated his story. He was not in Henderson at the time of the shooting. He was ruled out as a direct suspect but remained a person of interest. Back at the Keller residence, a deeper forensic sweep revealed more hidden evidence. Inside a hollowed-out panel behind a bedroom dresser, officers found a voice-activated recorder. On it were 17 audio files dating back 3 weeks. The files contained snippets of arguments, one-sided conversations, and what appeared to be recorded voicemails between Melissa and Alexander. The most recent file was dated the night before the shooting. In it, Melissa could be heard saying, "I'll tell him in the morning. It has to be clean. You'll meet me at the gate." The existence of this recording, combined with the half-packed suitcase and travel documents, painted a clear picture. Melissa had planned to leave permanently on the morning of June 17th. She had likely told Robert hours before the gunshot. Her preparations were detailed, her plans final. The confrontation had come too late. With Robert refusing to speak, detectives reconstructed the timeline using GPS data, forensic evidence, and witness statements. Melissa had booked her flight 3 days in advance. Her bags were packed the night before. Her phone, never found, was likely destroyed or taken. The towel pressed to her wound showed she had not died instantly. Someone, likely Robert, had attempted to slow the bleeding or create the appearance of hesitation. But the wound was fatal, and she died within minutes. The case now had its outline. A double life discovered, a confrontation escalated, and a final decision made in silence. By the third week of the investigation, the case appeared to be straightforward. Robert Keller discovered his wife's second life, confronted her, and, in a moment of finality, pulled the trigger. But Detective Stein wasn't convinced that the motive was that simple. The volume of digital and physical planning on both sides suggested something far more layered, and as the case files deepened, a different picture began to take shape. One that would force law enforcement to shift their entire understanding of what happened inside that house. The breakthrough came from a simple email auto-forwarding rule found in Melissa's work inbox. It had been set up months earlier, automatically sending copies of specific flagged messages to a private account not tied to any of her devices. That inbox was buried behind two-factor authentication, and when finally accessed, it contained a hidden repository of audio memos, scanned legal documents, and personal notes, Melissa's digital journal. One document stood out, a notarized affidavit dated 4 months before her death. In it, Melissa claimed she feared for her safety after discovering a hidden camera placed inside the bedroom smoke detector. She had removed it, photographed it, and included it in the affidavit. She didn't file the report with police, instead keeping it off record with a friend who was also a notary. That friend, when later contacted, confirmed Melissa had confided in her but begged her not to take it further, citing concerns about surveillance and digital retaliation. But it didn't end there. Another file, labeled Keller Timeline.xo contained color-coded entries tracing Melissa's suspicions back nearly 9 months. She had documented irregularities in bank withdrawals, VPN routing logs, and even subtle changes in the positions of personal items inside her second apartment. Melissa had long suspected that Robert had discovered her double life, and not recently, but almost a year ago. She believed he was watching her. There were no direct accusations in the file, no physical threats logged. But the tone of the entries became increasingly fearful. She noted that her car's dashboard camera had been disconnected without explanation. Her router had reset itself multiple times. She once returned home to find her pets confined to a room she hadn't entered in weeks. Small events, subtle, but consistent. The final entry, dated just 2 days before her death, read, "He knows. I saw the flight itinerary open on his laptop. In a tab he quickly closed. I think he's waiting. I don't think he'll let me go." Detectives re-examined Robert's devices and found a recovery file in his browser cache, Melissa's ticket to Austin. Though deleted from history, it had been opened at 1:26 a.m. the night before the shooting. That confirmed it. Robert knew she was leaving. But the timing matched something else. One of the audio recordings recovered from Melissa's hidden journal app. In the background, a second voice, soft but unmistakably male, could be heard whispering, "You think I didn't know?" It wasn't just a discovery. It was a setup. Investigators now theorized that Robert had known about Melissa's double life for months, but instead of confronting her directly, he had chosen to monitor her silently. He didn't ask. He recorded. He followed. And when her plan became irreversible, he let it proceed, right to the edge. And then came another twist. 2 days before Melissa's death, Robert had withdrawn $8,000 in cash from an account under his sister's name. The funds were never used and not found during the initial search. But when detectives re-interviewed Alexander Reed, he admitted something unexpected. Melissa had once asked him to play along in case her husband tried anything clever. She believed Robert was trying to build a false narrative against her, possibly to discredit her publicly or harm her reputation in court. She was trying to leave before it could happen. Then came the real revelation. In the cloud, backups from Robert's smartphone, investigators discovered a hidden folder synced from an encrypted notepad app. Within, it was a text file titled, "If It Ends." The contents were chilling. There will be 2 narratives, hers and mine. If she chooses chaos, I'll choose control. She won't make me look like the fool. She's not the victim. She's the architect. The document went on to lay out a scenario where Melissa would be framed as emotionally unstable, unfaithful, and manipulative. It included a reference to recordings staged in reflection and timing the towel for optics. The implication was direct. If things escalated, Robert intended to shape the outcome and the story before anyone else could. It was no longer just a crime of passion. It was premeditated perception control. Even more damning, a GoPro camera. Found in the back of Robert's SUV contained dashcam footage showing him trailing Melissa to her second apartment weeks before the murder. He had known the location. Known about Alexander. And yet he said nothing. He waited. In a stunning shift, prosecutors updated the charge from second-degree to first-degree murder with aggravating factors: premeditation, coercive control, and digital stalking. The defense, caught off guard, pushed back, claiming the new evidence was circumstantial, but the volume and precision of the files painted a clear picture. Robert didn't react. He planned. The final piece of the puzzle arrived when forensics recovered Melissa's missing phone, buried beneath a pile of trash inside a locked bin outside the Keller residence. The device was damaged, but the SD card inside was intact. It contained a voice memo, recorded at 4:12 a.m. the morning of the shooting. Melissa's voice. Shaky, panicked. "He's awake. He saw the bag. I told him it was work stuff, but he didn't believe me. I don't know what happens next." The recording ended abruptly. Investigators estimate Melissa was killed within 30 minutes of that memo. The truth wasn't just about a double life. It was about control, manipulation, and psychological warfare, waged quietly from both sides. And when it all collided, the result wasn't just chaos, it was lethal. By early September, Robert Keller was officially indicted on charges of first-degree murder, obstruction of justice, unlawful surveillance, and evidence tampering. The decision followed weeks of accumulating digital, physical, and testimonial evidence that painted a chilling picture of control, surveillance, and manipulation. Prosecutors dropped any remaining notions of crime of passion arguments. This was no spontaneous outburst. It was a calculated execution carried out by a man who had spent months watching and waiting. The trial was scheduled in the Clark County Superior Court and quickly gained attention across state lines. The headline wasn't just about a husband killing his wife. It was about a man who built a silent prison around someone who was trying to escape. And when that failed, he decided to end her life and write the ending himself. Prosecutor Diana Hayes led the case. Her opening argument was direct. This wasn't a man who lost control. This was a man who controlled everything. She introduced evidence with a methodical sequence. Melissa's flight itinerary, her hidden audio recordings, the financial withdrawals, the recovered files from Robert's devices, and the final voice memo recorded by Melissa mere minutes before her death. Hayes emphasized that Robert knew of Melissa's plans for months. He traced her steps, tracked her second apartment, downloaded her phone records, and carefully staged the crime scene. She showed the jury the encrypted note titled, "If It Ends," underlining its phrasing as a pre-written justification to be used after the crime was committed. She also played the dashcam video recovered from Robert's GoPro, his silent surveillance, of Melissa and Alexander. The defense struggled to form a coherent narrative. Robert's attorney attempted to argue for diminished responsibility, claiming emotional collapse triggered by betrayal and abandonment. But the volume and nature of digital evidence contradicted that claim. This was not the work of someone acting in sudden rage. It was the work of someone who laid a trap. Witness testimony included forensic specialists, a behavioral analyst, Melissa's co-worker who notarized the affidavit, and Alexander Reed. Reed remained calm under questioning. He confirmed that Melissa had been preparing to leave for months and feared that Robert would try to spin a narrative against her. When asked if Melissa ever expressed concern about her safety, he answered, "Yes, almost every time I saw her." Perhaps the most powerful testimony came from the lead investigator, Detective Laura Stein. She took the jury step by step through the chain of evidence, laying out Robert's search history, digital monitoring habits, and the calculated way in which Melissa's belongings were staged around her body. She highlighted the towel on Melissa's wound and the faint traces of blood on the kitchen sink, suggesting an attempt to partially clean the scene before dialing 911. The defense attempted to paint Melissa's double life as the root cause of chaos, but the courtroom didn't accept it. The jury was presented with Melissa's timeline spreadsheet, the Keller timeline.xolsx, which showed her documenting Robert's behavior long before the murder. They read the entries detailing the camera in the smoke detector, the movement of her possessions, the increasing anxiety that Robert was not just suspicious, but quietly tightening control around her. After 10 days of testimony, expert analysis, and digital walkthroughs, the prosecution rested its case. Robert Keller declined to testify. He sat silently throughout, unmoved, often scribbling notes on a yellow legal pad. The jury deliberated for less than 6 hours. The verdict: guilty on all counts. Robert Keller was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, plus an additional 15 years for evidence tampering and digital surveillance violations. The judge described the crime as an act of orchestration, not desperation, and labeled Robert a danger to anyone whose life could be manipulated through access and silence. Outside the courtroom, Melissa's friends and coworkers gathered to speak briefly with reporters. No long statements, no emotional breakdowns, just one sentiment repeated again and again. She tried to leave. He made sure she couldn't. And now, the man who tried to script the narrative is the one locked behind bars, while the truth, painful, haunting, and undeniable, stands in the open. Melissa Keller's story didn't end in a crime scene. It ended in a courtroom, where the truth was finally stripped bare. She wasn't living a double life for excitement or deception. She was trying to build an exit from a situation she believed had turned dangerous. What she didn't know was that Robert had already seen the exit sign and blocked the door. In the months since the trial, Melissa's case has sparked deeper conversations about digital surveillance within relationships, coercive control that leaves no bruises, and how manipulation can be carried out not with violence, but with quiet monitoring, subtle threats, and the erasure of freedom. Robert Keller wasn't chaotic. He was methodical. And that's what made him more dangerous. He used access, not anger, passwords, not punches, and when his wife planned to leave on her own terms, he used her own silence against her. In the end, it wasn't jealousy that killed Melissa. It was control. This case leaves behind more than a verdict. It leaves questions. How many people are trapped in situations where control doesn't look like abuse? How many silent observers are writing the end of someone else's story before it even starts? And most importantly, how many Melissa Kellers? Never get the chance to run? Because not all cages are built with locks. Some are built with data, surveillance, monitoring disguised as concern, and sometimes the person you trust the most is the one holding the pen to your ending.